The bill that I really want to talk about with y'all next is the Justice and Policing Act, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. This week, what's the cop's name? I don't even know. I don't remember. Forget him. We don't.
The murderer of George Floyd.
The murderer. He was sentenced to 22 and a half years. You guys were good with that? Were you okay with that?
Blackmond gets sentenced to more for stealing $9.
Yeah, I was about to say the same sentiment. It's kind of like, of course, I think in this country, we're always happy to just get the little bit that we get. But it's kind of like, we know the system is broken and why it's broken.
But we kind of just are like, you and I.
I mean, me personally, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I'm
not. I feel like we get to a point to where we're never satisfied.
Right.
We're never satisfied with nothing. Like, me and Kim was even talking, like, even the other day, and it's kind of like off topic in a sense, but I don't know if y'all heard about the IKEA situation. Mm-hmm. When they was giving them the food, it's just like, you eat that on the regular. You eat that on your own time.
That was a lot.
But I feel like, I feel like justice was served in a sense. Like, if it was anything under 10, I would have had a problem with it.
Right.
Yeah. But as I was telling Kim, Chauvin, the cop, he was I thought he was a first-time offender or whatever. I thought he didn't have no record.
No.
So I'm like, okay, man, that, they can't really go too hard on him because he's a first-time offender. But, I mean, me personally, I feel like that's more than enough time. Yeah. 22 years, like, in jail.
Considering that Amber Geiger, the woman, the cop, the murderer in Dallas, walked into Botham Jean's apartment and shot him while he was eating ice cream, and she got 10 years, I was okay with 22 years. Yeah. I would have liked to have seen him get like life in prison or whatever, but that's why we need to get the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act.
22 years as 15.
Yes, because he can get out early though, can't he?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize he's facing other charges also.
Yeah. He's got Fed charges, which is why I think they kind of were like, you're probably going to add more time with the Fed charges because
but
Fed
his appeal is strong.
But the Fed time might kind of like, because it's hard to do.
And he's definitely going to appeal.
Yo, you can't.
That juror, Lord, that juror is the reason. If a year from now Chauvin walks free, it's because that one Facebook picture of that Black Lives Matter shirt.
He had on the Black Lives Matter?
No, the juror, there's one juror.
Oh, so they're going to say, like, buy it?
Yeah, because one of the questions they ask you is, how do you feel about the movement? Are you biased? And he's on Facebook at some rally or, participating in a rally, and he has on a shirt that says Black Lives Matter.
But my question is this. Now, with the jury, that person didn't volunteer to be a jury, did he? Like, they didn't do their due diligence. That's not his fault. Like,
well, they did when they asked him, and he said no, which
it's sticky.
Black Lives Matter, the verb, or Black Lives Matter, the noun. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you could say Black Lives Matter, and you could believe Black Lives Matter. Does that mean that you participate and contribute and belong to the group that is known as Black Lives Matter? Because I've never pledged no allegiance to none of them.
And that's just a general phrase.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Right,
this is some real sticky situations.
Yeah.
And it's going to come down.
And that's one of the reasons, I think we talked about that before, that's one of my biggest issues with the Black Lives Matter movement. Not saying I don't support it, but like the way that it can be used against the movement without it being necessarily defined.
Yeah.
Stuff like this happens.
Because people think that because you're marching, you are a part of Black Lives Matter, because people have to compartmentalize things.
There's an organization,
right,
and then there's the movement.
Right.
And people don't understand.
And they don't care about
They don't understand. They don't care. Yeah. They don't want to know. It's like black. Okay, yeah. I've heard enough.
That's done.
I've heard enough. Black lives? Oh, hell no.
Not matter.
I don't want to hear nothing. Right, matter.
But the justice and that
the
act,
Justice and Policing Act,
the George Floyd.
We need that because
we need it.
Before we talk about it, because you break it down just for the people
that's
that's
what I was
listening,
going to
like,
say.
What
do you know about the Justice and Policing Act? What it has in it? I'm going to look up some more, but I know that qualified immunity, it would get rid of that
to a certain level. So
not altogether.
Not altogether. So we would still need states to do their jobs. It would take away the fact that police can sit in on their own interrogations. So if someone isn't being interrogated for what the police did to you, the police can sit in. It's going to take that away. It's going to take away stuff like chokeholds and excessive force, and it's going to put in like mental health aspects of it and how police need to react to certain situations. But it's a big bill, and we need it. But also, there's a lot of provisions in it that we're going to need the state. We do live in a federalized government, and when it comes down to things like qualified immunity, it's set to a certain level, right? Because right now the qualified immunity clause that the Supreme Court uses is that if it hasn't been established, that is the key word, established clause. So if I kill somebody, right, I'm a police officer, I kill somebody, and I didn't kill them in an exact manner that somebody else has killed and gotten sentenced to, I will get away. It takes that part away to a certain degree. It doesn't take it away all the way. It leaves it up to the states. There's a lot of holes in it. But as a blanket, we need it.
We need it.
We need it.
It also establishes a national database of police misconduct, which there is not one. Yeah. There are some private entities that have put together. They've been keeping track of police murders and stuff like that. You could look that up. But we need a national registry so that people can look and not go to the next town to get a job when they kill somebody.
Garrett Rolfe.
Yeah.
Right
here.
Right, Garrett Rolfe. He's had complaints. He's done this before. And that's my problem. In Atlanta, a lot of these police officers come from New Orleans. And they come from New York. And they come from Minneapolis and Louisville, who have killed or hurt people before. And they get hired again.
Here's a few other points of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Prohibits federal and state and local law enforcement from racial, religious, and discriminatory profiling. Okay.
Until you change the curriculum, you're not changing it.
Mandate training on racial, religious, and discriminatory profiling for law enforcement. They definitely need that. Requires law enforcement to collect data on all investigatory activity. So everything that you do, we need to know what you did. It bans chokeholds. Carotid holds? What's that?
Carotid holds. So when you put pressure on the carotid artery, it bursts, and you die within 3 seconds.
Damn. Okay. At the federal level and conditions law enforcement funding for state and local governments banning chokeholds. So if you've seen lately, the governors have put in place rules that if you do anything to defund the police, redirect funds to the police, they're not going to provide any funding from the federal government. It bans no-knock warrants in drug cases at the federal level and conditions law enforcement funding for state and local governments, banning no chokehold warrants at the local and state level. Requires that deadly force be used only as a last resort. Requires officers to employ de-escalation techniques first. How many people would be alive if they were doing that now?
Definitely the 271 black men that were killed since 2017 alone.
Limits the transfer of military-grade equipment to state and local law enforcement because for what reason they had no-limit tanks outside the state capitol right after January 6th, and they started building a fence. Do you guys remember the tanks that were out there?
The fence is almost done.
Oh, shit.
And it's funny because I can still walk inside that capitol. You can't stop me.
You can't, right.
It's my building. I pay for it.
Requires federal uniformed police officers to wear body cameras. Shout out to the family of Jabari Robinson, Monteria Robinson. Ever since the murder of her son, Jabari Robinson, Atlanta stopped participating in the federal rundown on people, basically, because the federal officers didn't wear body cameras and the Atlanta officers did. See how there's a disconnect.
So I always wear Jamarian stuff on my hand because that's like the case closest to me because I'm very close with Monteria. Those federal officers told outside. The last thing that's recorded on the body cam is turn your body cams off.
So they did that deliberately.
Yeah. 17 police officers with long-range guns with with flashbang grenades against a 150-pound, 5'5" man who was surrendering. Because he did nothing wrong, by the way.
It's almost like, you know, some of these cases are so crazy.
And people don't
know about them.
And of course, we know the reason behind that also. It's kind of like, it's almost sad how normalized a lot of this stuff has become. Because, of course, we all know Monteria. We know, you know what I'm saying, how much strength she showed, you know, in her battle to get justice for her son.
Still fighting.
And even when I learned the details, because I met her 3 years ago, and like when I was just reading the details of the case, I was like, how do you get away with murdering a person like this? You know what I'm saying?
And then look at all the changes that have been made since, though. I mean, they've had a new police chief, they've had a new DA, they've had a new mayor, they've got like all these people that are just passing the torch, and saying that you handle it.
Fonnie Willis.
And that's the person who didn't dodge in the cases supposedly. Like it just kind of like, once again, like, how can you look us in the face and not do your job?
Well, like, you can do whatever you want to do after they elect you.
Fonnie Willis looked at Monteria and said, "You knew your son had a mental condition. What are we supposed to do about this?" Basically saying, I can't do anything. The fact that your son was shot 110 times and left with 76 bullet holes in his body, I'm not going to do anything because you knew your son had a mental condition. And Monteria has to wake up every single morning, get that picture of her son's autopsy body, and walk down the street.
And this is what I mean. Elections have consequences. God forbid that happens to anybody else. You see the attitude that Rayshard Brooks' case is getting, Jamarian Robinson's case is getting, the Jimmy Atchison case is getting, and the countless, numerous other ones. These are just the ones that we know. These are the people that have come talk to us at the show that we keep up with. But proactive is better than reactive. So make sure when you're voting for people, they have a heart for the people, like the people we've been talking about.